Some of you know that I grew up in western Pennsylvania, just a couple hours away from here. My parents live about 2 hours away. But when Beth and I finished college, we moved to Kentucky. And we moved to Wilmore, Kentucky, which is this little town in the middle of nowhere. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. And we moved to this tiny little town, and I'll tell you, I felt like I moved to the very deep south. Like I felt like I was living in a place that I had never known. Now, because of the seminary that's there are people that come from all over the country and all over the world, and I became friends with a lot of folks from Alabama and Mississippi, friends who, when they called me Matt, made it sound like my name was 4 syllables long, and they felt like they were living in the north, like they felt like they had moved to the coldest lands they had ever known. I learned a lot from them, and one of the things I learned from my good Southern friends was the appropriate use of one of the greatest words in the English language, y'all. What I learned about the word y'all, though, is that when you say y'all, you're really talking to like 2 or 3 people, right? So you say, why don't y'all come over for dinner? That's like just 2, 3 people in front of you. It's a very limited, kind of narrow group of folks. But there's this other word, or this other way of using the word y'all, that's much larger. It's when you say, all y'all. All y'all come over. How are all y'all doing today? It's a much larger idea. It's all-encompassing and much bigger. It speaks to the people that are in front of you, the people that hear your voice, and their friends, and their friends' friends, and their friends' friends' friends. Like, when you say, why don't you all y'all come over, you better be ready for a party, because lots of people are coming. In the passage today, Paul is saying, listen, the gospel, the good news of Jesus, is for all y'all. It's for everybody. Paul writes this letter to the Ephesians, to the Gentiles. And so as he writes to them and says, listen, you have been brought into the family of Christ. You've been redeemed and forgiven. Grace has been lavished upon you. He's saying to them, you who once were beyond are now welcomed in. Not that you are spectators, not that you are anything else, but you are brought into the family. You have experienced God's glorious welcome. Have you ever been welcomed in a way that you haven't forgotten? Like really welcomed, where you stood and said, these are my people. I remember when I was planning a new church, I used to go to this coffee shop every day. I would go to the same coffee shop. I got to know the people who worked there, the employees. I would sit and talk to them and talk to all the patrons. I learned so much about the coffee shop that one day when they were short-staffed, I jumped in and worked their drive-through because they needed some help. One year they called me, they texted me, it was my birthday. And they said, why don't you come by? And it was my day off, I wasn't going to go, but I thought, okay, I'll go over to the coffee shop. So I went over, and they had made me my favorite coffee, a spicy mocha, and they had made me a special flourless chocolate cake because they knew I was gluten-free. I stood there and said, those are my people. And I felt welcomed. I remember during the same time period when I was trying really hard to meet new folks, trying really hard to engage with new people, and it was really a hard task. And so I was praying and saying, God, where should I go to meet new people? And God said, go to the bar at the end of your street. So I went to the bar at the end of my street. Now, I was completely out of my comfort zone. I was 30 years old. I was raised as a good holiness Methodist. I had never been into a bar. I wasn't sure what kind of debt of iniquity I was about to experience. What I found were people who welcomed me and said, here, come sit with us. Play trivia with us. I'm Jeff, and I'm Zach, and I'm Erica, and why don't you sit and enjoy some time with us? And I knew I was welcomed. Church, we should be a place of welcome. I love the fact that Paul uses adoption language. And if you know anything about our family's story, that makes sense. I know some of you have a story of adoption too. And I'll tell you, friends, that is a day I will never forget. April 4th, 2017, at a courtroom down at the courthouse, where Beth and I and our kids sat nervously waiting for Judge Gougeot to come in. We were jumpy and afraid. We were surrounded by about 50 people who just showed up, people from church and family who came to support us, to watch the moment when the state declared the thing that we already knew, that we were a family. The kids were nervous, we were nervous, and we waited, and all the legal things were happening, and finally it came to the point where the judge was about to change everyone's name. From now on, you will be Kylie Ann Johnson, and you will be Hunter Roger Johnson. And my kids just relaxed, because this was the moment they had waited for. Suddenly, the tragedy of their life was being redeemed into beauty. Suddenly, my life was being redeemed into beauty. Friends, we have been adopted into Christ's family. Our names have been changed. We have been given a new identity. We are not outsiders and strangers anymore, but we are welcomed in together. We are all God's family, not by DNA, but by something stronger and richer through Christ's love. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't pause for just a moment. Offer me a moment of personal privilege. In West Virginia, because of the opioid epidemic that has devastated our state, we are number 2 per capita in children that are being removed from their homes. And we are number 49 per capita in children in homes that are available. There may be some of you here today who will feel God's call to take in some kids who need to know that they are loved. I don't want you to miss God's call. I don't want you to miss a moment where God nudges. And friends, if you respond to God's call to take in some kids who need to know that they are loved and welcomed into families, I promise you that your church will stand beside you and behind you. We don't want to miss the work that God is doing, the work that God has invited us into, the work of redemption that God continues to bring to light. May we be dealers of hope. May we be people who know that we have been welcomed, so we extend God's welcome. May we never forget that we are an all y'all kind of people who welcome and engage and include everyone, who know that the table has been set and that Christ brings all into his family.